which I actually have a copy of right over here, which you're welcome to peruse. So ultimately, after kind of the disaster of Jamestown for the first couple of years, starvation, disease, warfare, cannibalism, things like that, ultimately they're going to introduce a new military code. And it's going to be ultimately kind of all codified together in the Laws Divine, Moral, and Martial, which is going to be instituted and eventually published in 1609 and later published in 1612. So while we are founded here in 1611, we are under martial law. We are under, again, the Laws Divine, Moral, and Martial. So basically what this is it's going to put Virginia under very strict military discipline. And with this strict military discipline, essentially the goal is to quite literally whip Virginia into proper shape. Again, the colony is on the brink of disaster in 1609 and 1610, and really this is intended, again, to try to kind of right the ship. And again, the solution for a lot of the people here in this era is, again, to try to kind of tighten the fist. So what we see is that we see a variety of corporal and capital punishment kind of prescribed in these laws. Now, throughout the park, particularly you'll see over there in just a little bit, we have a couple of different ways of execution. The most common, of course, would have been hanging, but a variety of other ones are going to be mentioned in other accounts as being carried out here, basically to maintain discipline. In particular, one problem that we know that Henricus dealt with, and that Sir Thomas Dale, our founder, dealt with, was essentially basically some of his men kind of leaving and joining the Native Americans, and joining kind of the Indians, at least as the source would have said. And one of the punishments for those that are going to be returned, according to George Percy, is basically different ways of execution, because that's considered treason. Not only are you, again, going to the enemy, but you're also basically depriving the colony of your labor and of your body. So what the punishments are, according to one of our sources, are some of the ones that we have actually set up over here. So if you see over here, this stake over here, we're going to be doing, hopefully if weather permits, a burning at the effigy at 3. It's going to give you a sense of burning at the stake. That was one way that was done. Hanging, of course, was very popular. Shot to death was another one. Another one that we'll actually be demonstrating probably around lunchtime is over there. That's going to be breaking at the wheel. Now, with these laws, Divine, Moral, and Martial, it is getting, again, Virginia under control, but it's not without criticism. One of the main criticisms is basically kind of how the law is pretty harsh and how it is kind of executed, sometimes literally. So Sir Thomas Dale will get a lot of criticism for how he ultimately tries to carry out the laws, and particularly with how he carries out some of the punishments with them. Again, you could make the argument that it is necessary for, again, Virginia to be on the right track, but we do know, again, that it is not done without, again, some people kind of complaining about it. Now, other punishments that we're talking a little bit more about outside of execution, these are punishments that are intended to basically humiliate the transgressor and, in a way, kind of enforce community morality. It's peer pressure, if you might take it that way. So some of the things that we're using for peer pressure, you can actually see one of them right over here. This is the whipping post. So for a variety of infractions, whipping could be prescribed. For instance, let's say that on the second offense, you didn't attend church. Well, one of the punishments for that is a public whipping. Let's say that you bad-talked the minister. One of the punishments is actually for 3 Sabbath days, you're going to be whipped in front of the public, again, basically on the public whipping post, and you're going to have to go to the church, and basically, in front of the entire congregation, you're going to have to basically plead forgiveness for the minister right from there. So we know whipping is going to be pretty public. It's a pretty common one that is used in the laws to, again, kind of use you as an example. And that's what a lot of punishment is in this time period. It's less for your rehabilitation or anything like that. It's more as a deterrent and more to kind of show other people in the community kind of what not to do, and in a way deter them from committing similar crimes. Now, a couple of other things that also are kind of on display and in use here in this time period. We actually have some stuff that's situated just up over there. So if you'd like to come with me, you're welcome to go check them out. And you're confused is a pretty common punishment. It's actually considered, in some cases, kind of letting you off with a warning. Now, branding could be all sorts of places, usually on your hand or on your face. So the one that we have over here is a T for thief, but there are a number of other ones. For instance, sometimes indentured servants and later enslaved Africans are going to be branded on the face with R's for runaways. So this is used for a variety of kind of punishments, and again, that's used to show other people in the community what they have done. Now over here we have a couple of other things as well.
Choose company with censoring below. So stuff isn't
so again, here is an example of that whip. Again, the cat of nine tails. Now again, oftentimes again used on the back, right? And the thing is, a lot of times these would have metal studs on the edge of them. They would also get kind of dried with blood, so these could be quite harsh. Again, an example of a whip that you might see in this period. Now another thing that we also
and they send this thing home. Well, by that point, Dale's been gone for 7 years, dead for
this guy right over here. So these are irons, and you see we got some manacles, we also got some shackles, and basically one of the punishments that are prescribed in the laws, particularly for military men who, let's say, wasted their powder in their shot or gambled on duty, is basically you'd be held in prison, and you would have basically these on your ankles, you'd have this down here, and you basically be in a ball like this, sometimes for days at a time. So basically in a ball like that. That's called laying at the irons. So that's another one that's going to be used as well. And then of course we got some other ones that Terry has concocted up over here. So this particular one is not prescribed in the laws, but it is mentioned in, again, contemporary accounts, not only here in Virginia, but also in England. So this is a scold's bridle, or what we call a brank, and essentially what this is for is, for lack of a better word, for women who are considered to be mouthy, right? So those who scold, those who, again, rumor monger, things like that. And essentially what they would do is they would put the, again, apparatus on their kind of head, putting their, again, kind of nose through here. And in some cases, some of them would have basically attachments that would have basically a needle and a nail that would stick through your tongue here. You would wear this for a day, and essentially that you'd be paraded around, sometimes with basically a chain attached to it, through the community, again, to enforce that, this is a woman has done something like that, and to try to, again, deter other women from committing similar offenses. So again, this is a pretty popular thing. Now again, we don't see this in use, at least in the earliest kind of mentions of Virginia law, but we know that pretty soon afterwards, ultimately, Virginia is going to introduce a lot of the same kind of methods, including things like this, as well as some other things like ducking stool. Last but not least, just a simple nail, but nails were also used in punishment. One of the ones that they would actually use, basically they would put these nails through your ear. So if you had a pillory, that's essentially the thing that you see that you go like this, you put your head on through, or if you even just had a post, like our whipping post, you would put your ear, they'd put your ear in, basically they would nail your ear to the board, sometimes for a day, sometimes for a few hours. At the end of it, they would not take the nail out, they would instead cut your ear off. So again, another way that, again, you would be quite literally earmarked as someone who committed, again, a crime is through, again, just nailing you. And again, through another way of kind of public humiliation. Questions you have about anything we've mentioned? Anything you're also welcome to go on in and explore.
How many times was it actually done, you believe?
How many times was this actually done? I don't know. I mean, this was done pretty considerably. But the pillory?
Yeah. A couple of accounts of it.
Yeah, and I know it's common to have the pillory, but I don't have an exact number for you. But I mean, it's pretty common. It's a common punishment in England, and it's going to become a common punishment here in colonial America as well. Usually those who are pilloried are doing something kind of deceitful. So like counterfeiting, I think perjury, that kind of stuff.
Counterfeiting is treason.
Counterfeiting is treason? Okay.
Yep.
What is it then?
You only do that once.
Yeah, okay. Well, then I'm thinking perjury, right?
Yeah, perjury.
Is it laws of it's deceit, right? I mean, it's deceitful things that'll get you in the pillory.
False accusations.
Okay. So it's things that are deceitful. And now the stocks, that's kind of our equivalent. It's kind of like the pillar, or not the pillar, the laying in irons here. Those are for a little bit more kind of like disorderly conduct kind of thing. But ultimately with the pillory, that's again going to be things of deceit. So I don't know how often they would do it, but I mean it's not uncommon certainly. Good question.
The company wants Dale to do this, the Virginia Company of London, and they're thinking that this level of discipline, shall we say, is going to make us work harder and do more. We're never going to find gold. None of those things are going to happen. Yeah. It does work in one way that the population goes up, but that's also, as I said, due to other factors. But the idea that you can treat people as cruelly as not just Dale does, but landowners over here. Say in 1616 you came over here as an indentured servant, or 1615 or 1618. There's a very good chance you'll die before you see your 7 or so year contract come up, because they are working people so hard. That's not Dale. That's like he owns 500 acres and hires you to come work for him. He will work you into the ground most of the time. And there is such an enormous death toll over here that's not explainable. King James finally, before 1624, steps in and says, okay, what's going on over there? Why are we losing so many people? Because James gave the company this land, but lets them do their thing. Doesn't give them any money, doesn't do anything, but he's still the king. So the complaints finally reach him by early 1620s to say, I want to know what's going on over here. And in 1624, I think, or 23, he will finally, after investigating the company, Virginia Company of London, take away their charter because of all these terrible things that have been going on. And I'm not going to defend the company, but I will say this: just because you're wealthy gentlemen like these guys were back home, that doesn't mean you know how to run a business, especially from 3,000 miles away with no transatlantic communication to speak of. So these guys were shooting in the dark, and they were throwing things against the wall to see what stuck. And unfortunately, a lot of people got killed. But the other side of that coin is a lot of people succeeded.
Yes.
The headright system might have been crooked, but a lot of people will gain thousands of acres. A lot of people, the colony is established by these people, and it moves forward. Before the uprising of 1622, the colony was moving forward. We had been at peace. More people were coming. Tobacco was going huge. Going huge. That sounded literate. But it's not until the uprising that we all get slapped back down. So Dale's a weird guy. He did some really good things and some really bad things. I think he needed counseling.
I think it's important to keep it in context that, we look at historical figures a lot of times as if it's cut and dry that they were this one thing. And they're people like all of us, and we're all complex. Just because these guys are looked at as doing really great things or really bad things, that's not all of who they were. There's other aspects of what they did to think about.
And one of the things I make sure I tell, especially our school kids, because this isn't on display for kids, trust me, but when we talk about laws, divine, moral, and martial, and the executions and things, this is not England alone. This is European culture. Yeah. It's global culture. Yeah. The Chinese, the Japanese, everybody is treating everybody badly. Yeah. The Powhatans, they had their own things they did to their own people. So humans as a whole, not this group or that group or this group, but humans as a whole tend to be pretty bad to each other.
Yeah. That's what amazes me.
If you're interested, you can look up, just Google Catherine wheel, and you'll find all kinds of links. There's a variety of ways this was used.
It's called a Catherine?
Yeah, named after St. Catherine of Alexandria. She refused, I forget at what year, it's a legend, of course, but it's back before most of Europe had become Christian. She refuses to give up her Christianity, so they have her supposedly put on this, but when she touches it, it falls apart. So they can't put her on it because that's the hand of God. So they just decapitate her instead. But again, this is, I forget, I don't know, I guess it was in Egypt or something. Because she's from Alexandria. But it's gotten her name because of that, the Catherine wheel. You'll also hear it just called the wheel, broken on the wheel, things like that. It's still, I forget which Scandinavian country it is, but one of their slang terms for when they're really tired is, I feel like I've been on the wheel. I read that recently. So that still lingers,
Said what?
I feel like I've been upon the wheel. When you're really tired, it's like saying I'm beat. I don't know which language it is. It's either Swedish or Norwegian, I think. But can you imagine that still staying in your head?
That's the legacy. Something like this, it was so brutal that's kind of the legacy. Is that long after it's been abolished as a punishment, it still holds on in vernacular because it's such a terrifying thing.
And you gotta wonder who thinks of these. It's traceable to the Franks in the 400s as far as Europe goes, but only because they would drag someone behind a cart as part of an execution process. And there's a theory that somehow evolved into using the wheel. We really don't know. But think of the minds that said, after you crush every bone in his body while he's alive, weave his arms and legs broken through the spokes. Oh, yeah, that'll work. The minds that come up with this stuff,
Well, also skinning people alive.
And that's multiple cultures doing that. Yeah. So, and that, again, that's what I always get across, especially to our school kids. People are not so good to each other. At least back then. We can hope it's different now, right?
And it's important, I think, to keep in mind, too, that this isn't just a punishment for that individual. It's also a spectacle to gain compliance with the rest of your people.
Yeah.
So that,
you see this being done, and all that's on your head is, I don't want that happening to me,
Right.
So. Yeah. Well, we're going to put this together around, if the weather holds, probably between 12 and 1. What time is it now? Does anybody know? Do you have a time, sir?
Tied him to a tree, and they proceeded to do to him what you do to any animal that you're going to that you have prepared to skin. You get mussel shells, and they flayed him. They flayed him alive, and this was basically in punishment for a whole lot of different indiscretions that happened along the way. Because by this point in time, what the English were called trading, we would call armed robbery. They were showing up, guns in hand, taking whatever the foodstuffs they could get their hands on, leaving a pile of just random trade item junk, saying it was a trade arrangement, and saying then we left the best of friends. That's actually written down. We left the best of friends after something like this. What utter nonsense. No one in their right mind would see what happened there and say, oh yeah, that was a fair trade. No, it wasn't consensual at all. And by this point in time, the English were pretty much dependent on the natives for their foodstuffs from the very beginning, and they knew that. And even before they got here, the Virginia Company basically told them that our crops probably aren't going to work in the ground right off the bat. You're going to be dependent on the English on the natives for your sustenance for a while. Try to keep good relations with them as long as you can. But they were never under any illusions that they wouldn't be able to maintain that forever. So by 1609, they'd already had a couple tough winters and things like that. But by 1609, things had gotten to the point where they had already damaged trade relations because they didn't understand the way the natives traded. They're coming from the mindset of like commodity-based trading, that if I'm going to trade you something, I'm going to get something of equal or greater value. While the natives are trading from a point of trying to build connections. So if you were to give me something, and I were to give you something of lesser value, you would expect me to give you, make up for that later on, and just by the act of trading, we've become better friends, or we should be. Even if they were, say, a group of hunters who wanted to pass through another chiefdom's lands to get to a different hunting spot, it would be customary for them to bring gifts. And even if the tribe refused them, they would still keep those gifts, because it's all about, maybe next time, you hadn't showed me the proper respect this time or this season around, but maybe next hunting season we'll be better friends. And everyone, would part more or less amicably. The English come here with their European ideals of ownership and commodity-based trading, and things get rather muddied very quickly. And just from that misunderstanding from the jump, things are basically poisoned. There's all these issues with, for instance, they start off trading copper, and John Smith can feed the colony fairly well with the copper in the proportions that are being traded, and then Captain Newport comes around with instructions that because they're supposed to keep good good relations with the natives to basically give them whatever asking price they want. So that, just like any commodity, you can ruin the market by overtrading it. So John Smith states that we could not get for a pound of copper what I could previously fetch for an ounce. So it completely destroys that market. The sailors don't help either. The sailors are illicitly trading with the natives fairly frequently. So that creates a desperate situation. And by that point, well, if I don't have anything the natives are willing to trade me for their corn, I still need corn, because all the things I have that I brought to trade, I can't, like copper and iron tools and things like that. I can't eat any of that. Fine cloth, beads, nope, can't eat any of that. So I need to eat. Well, how's that going to work? Well, that's unfortunately where the guns came in. So that poisoned relationship even more. And then by this point in time, by the end of 1609, where this event happens to Ratcliffe, by this point John Smith had already gotten his terrible wound from the powder bag going up, and he was already heading back to England. So the colony is left fairly leaderless, or at least leaderless as far as the natives are concerned, because that's who they've been having their back and forth. That's who they had built a relationship with, was John Smith. So their middleman is gone, their point man is gone. So all these other Englishmen are doing whatever they want. Pretty much right after Smith is out of the picture, they start raiding heavily and things of that nature. And so by this point in time, by the end of 1609, they are fairly desperate, because here's winter and we don't have any food. And so they show up. Radcliffe meets a horrific end, and at that point we've entered the full starving time, because starving time isn't the English were silly and they didn't put down food and they didn't know what they were doing. They're too busy chasing after gold to actually prioritize crops or anything. No, it was give credit where credit is due. It was a full-on siege. The Powhatan, who really didn't engage in siege warfare, figured it out on their first go. So give them full credit on that one, and it almost worked too. It was about this far from actually working.
Repeat that. What did the Powhatans do?
So everyone's heard of the starving time, right? Yeah. Well, there's a misconception that the starving time happened because the English didn't put down crops. Mm-hmm. They were incompetent. They were prioritizing things like gold and things like over actually things they could eat.
Yeah.
But in reality, what it was the natives blockaded Jamestown. They prevented them from resupplying themselves. They had besieged them. It was a siege. And because they besieged something they had never really done before, they figured out siege warfare on the first go. So if they tried to leave the fort, they'd catch an arrow. They couldn't try and take any ships upriver because they would catch an arrow. And so they had them pretty well boxed in and at their mercy. And the whole idea being that, we could, the natives could attack, and they're going to take heavy losses if they do, because a starving man can kill someone with a musket ball or a cannon just as, I should say a cannon ball or a musket ball from a starving man can kill someone just as well as from a man who's been well fed. So why risk it? Let's just starve them out, and when they're all either dead or too weak to fight back, we'll just stroll right into Jamesport. We'll take all the fun things that we want, like iron tools and cloth and so on, and we'll torch the place, and it'll be a nice story to tell our kids later on.
So you're saying the colonists really had planted crops?
They tried, but they were still fairly reliant on on trade with the natives and things like that. So they did make attempts to plant food, and they had some, middling success here and there. But the point of the matter is, the reason why the starving time was so bad wasn't because they were neglecting that by any means. It was because they were besieged. Just like, any castle that they lay under siege, it can't get to foodstuffs. So there are plenty of peoples around that even if the Powhatan weren't willing to trade with them, by that point they were starting to trade with some of the enemies of Powhatan, which is another reason that kind of exacerbated the issue. That I can't let these people start trading things like iron tools and weapons to my enemies.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to completely shut this down and we're going to box them in. We're not going to let them get in or out. So, and it did. It almost worked. Of the 200 odd some people that were there before the starving time happened, there were about 60 by the time relief came. And of those 60, they said it was Sir Thomas Gates and his company, who were prior shipwrecked on Bermuda, and they sort of self-rescued. And there's so many different things that had to line up for Jamestown to still exist by the 1620s and so on. For them to actually get through that first 5-year block, so many different things had to line up perfectly. And one of them was, if that ship hadn't have shipwrecked, if the Sea Venture hadn't shipwrecked on Bermuda when it did, that would have been more mouths to feed in the colony. They would have starved much faster. Furthermore, it was fortuitous that they got there when they did, because they were saying that these people didn't have days to live, they had hours. I mean, the scene that they walked into was, anytime you've seen famine anywhere, walking skeletons of people who were too weak to get out of bed. Yeah, that's basically what they walked into the fort. They seemingly deserted. They called out, they rang bells, things like that. Ghost town. They start walking into these houses and they find people who are some alive, some dead, but the ones who are alive barely.
Well, I thought the colonists were leaving. They were on a ship and they were sailing down the river when they met.
Yep, that comes. So the party that Gates is leaving in, so they were shipwrecked on Bermuda for about 10 months, and they were bringing with them the new charter for the colony and some new leadership and things like that. But he was the representative of the governor who would show up in that fleet that you're talking about. But basically, they get there and they realize that the situation is so untenable that they don't have enough food to feed themselves and all these starving people, and it's too bad to support them. So that's when they decide to leave, and it's on their way out. By the time they get to Fort Algernon, which is now Hampton, it's when they figure out that they're literally about to leave this continent behind, that they see those sails on the horizon, and that is Governor Delaware, that is his retinue, that is his whole resupply fleet. And you better believe they turn them right around, saying, "Oh no, you're not abandoning my new charge. Turn yourselves right around and get back to Jamestown."
Well, did the Powhatans end their siege when Gates came?
So by that point, it was enough force that they could basically open it up. So yeah, they had to abandon the siege by that point. Now the war was still going on, but it wasn't as, and that's probably one of the reasons why they said it wasn't tenable for them to stay, was because it was still in a state of war and things have been so muddy. The fact that they got through is frankly impressive, because it was a full siege blockade kind of thing. So they got through all that. And they didn't really have to fight their way through, though. It was enough of a show of force, I think, of them just coming up the river that the natives didn't expect that they were able to just kind of pass through. So they were able to lift the siege basically and resupply, give them enough food to be able to evacuate, more or less. And at one point they almost burned Jamestown, the English did, and it was up to Gates, who basically said, no, we might come back, so don't torch it. And it's a good thing they didn't torch it, because again, had they done that, that's one more thing that might have gotten them to at least abandon that spot on the river, if not the whole venture entirely. So, yep. Well, I'm sort of setting up this area right now, so we're...
The English, and you're going to kill these people. Some of them are friends, some of them are family, and some of these Indians are servants in these English people's homes as well. Some people get warned ahead of time that this is going to happen. And by ahead of time, I either mean the night before or the morning of. If you have 200 acres like the Proctors do here, your neighbor's not close by. You can't go run and warn them. So in this case, John Proctor is not here at the time of this attack. Come on in, I've got plenty of seats. His wife Alice is here, and she's here with up to, we know they had 4 indentured servants while they're here in Virginia. But if you watch our video at the front, it says she's by herself holding off of this attack for 3 weeks. Talk about the Great Massacre of 1622. She's not here by herself, she's got her servants, but her husband's not here. And she's not holding off an attack for every single hour of every single day for 3 weeks. She doesn't have enough weapons for that, let alone anything else. What happens is the Jamestown militia is going to go and check in on every plantation house along the James River. It just takes them that long to get up here. So they get up here, they say, "Hey, Alice, you got to come with us, Mrs. Proctor." She goes, "No, I've only been here since last fall, so 1621. I just got here. My husband's not here. I'm not going anywhere." "Well, if you don't come with us, we're going to burn down your house." "But it's tobacco planting season. It's March. I got to get my tobacco in the ground, or else I won't have any money." "We're going to burn down your house if you don't come with us." So she and her servants, they gather what they can, and they move down to Jamestown Fort. They'll stay down there till May of that year, and then at that point they relocate nearby to a place called Paces Pains. July is when John Proctor finally comes back home to Virginia, figures out where his wife is, and they stay down there the rest of their lives. And things go, for the most part, okay. Until 2 years later, in 1624. In that case, John and Alice are brought to court because 2 of their servants have died due to beatings. One of them is Elias. He is being beaten with a rake and has his back broken and dies from the wounds. The other is Elizabeth. Elizabeth is a young woman who's brought in as an indentured servant. Indentured servants are contracted on average between 4 to 7 years to work. Person here that's a plantation or pays for the way over, gives them food, housing, clothing, medical, whatever they might need while they're here. In return, these people work for them 24/7 essentially until they pay off that contract. Alice has this lovely young lady named Elizabeth who is contracted as her indentured servant. Elizabeth keeps running away. Every time Elizabeth runs away, Alice beats her to the point where she dies due to her beatings. This is why she's brought to court. She is brought to court because she's been beaten to death with a whip made from fish hooks. And as you can see, our fish hooks made by our lovely folks up at the front at our blacksmithing joint. These fish hooks are not petite. They are awfully sharp, they're awfully heavy, and they are cast iron. Imagine having at least once with those would do some damage, let alone multiple issues. Well, we do have the court cases from this period case of Elizabeth going to neighbors and begging for assistance, going to friends, looking for help because her mistress and her master keep beating her to the point where she's found in the woods having died of the wounds. Now, John and Elizabeth, being the wonderfully high-standing individuals that they are, all right, go on your merry ways. So, it's good to have money in the column. It's not necessarily good to be an indentured servant, but if you can make it over the past few years of your indentured servant contract and keep going, you'll eventually get land of your own. You'll be able to start a family and a farm of your own and bring in servants of your own as well. You just have to get over that hump first. Well, fortunately for Elias and Elizabeth, however, they never got that chance. And so that's our tale that we tell of Alice and John Proctor here in the colony. But I like to think about, if you think of Alice's perspective a little bit, she gets here in the fall of 21. She deals with the massacre in March of 22. She's left without her husband for months on end to deal with all of this. I like to think she suffered some trauma. I can't diagnose her, but there's something going on up there. I mean, anybody would be disturbed a little bit having to go through all of that. So I think she looks at Elizabeth and she goes, "Elizabeth, why can't you behave? Why can't you act like you need to? We have to be resourceful. We have to get through this. I'm going to keep beating you if you don't behave. You're not doing what I need you to do. Why can't you act like I did? I survived all this." Don't know, wasn't there, can't prove it, can't diagnose her, but that's what I think is some of what's going through Alice Proctor's mind dealing with her servant and some of her other servants throughout time. But this is women in the 1610s, 1620s. It's a different time. And Virginia's a different time too. Women don't have the luxurious powers we have today. Women do start to see some of that transition here in Virginia in the early years. We can go to court, whether we're indentured servant or not. We can marry as we choose, if we're not an indentured servant. We have a lot more leeway here. But the rules are there, and the rules are still in place, no matter what walk of life you are. And if you go against them, there are punishments for that. You guys have any questions today? I know it's a lot of heavy stuff today, I'm sorry. I'm the agriculture person, so if you have any agriculture questions also, feel free to ask me any of those two. I'm here at the plantation at the hospital. These are my two localities they put me most of the times. But if any animals or plant questions, I'm the person to ask. If not, you are welcome to continue on your journey. We have more people around the corner here for you to ask questions, listen to, and